Time to talk about the main event for Friday, the Kentucky Oaks. For those of you watching on video, we'll be pulling up the past performances so you can follow along if you're listening on the podcast and with audio. Thanks for tuning in. Darin Zoccali and Andrew Champagne will be joining me to discuss the main event. And if you are looking for some handicapping help or you want to find the place to get the best research done, make sure to head to drf.com, get those past performances and your Kentucky Derby packages. They are now available. So Andrew Champagne, Darin Zoccali, DZ, you're actually out in Kentucky right now. We've been talking a little bit over the last couple of days. They drew the cards on Saturday, and we were talking on Monday night. This is one of the best 2 days, top to bottom, of cards that I can remember as far as quality, quantity. Some of these big stakes days will get a few stakes races where you'll have some heavy favorites. A couple horses maybe got hurt leading in, or they just pointed in different directions. That just does not seem to be the case on Friday or on Saturday. Massive, massive cards.
Yeah, you really couldn't ask for anything better from a standpoint of number of entries, depth of field. Some races, obviously there'll be favorites that people will lean on, but there's no like 2 to 5 shots that are just going to walk in the park. I mean, the turf races are ultra competitive, and obviously leading all the way through to Oaks and Derby. I agree. Breeders' Cup is an excellent 2 days, but I can't remember seeing a couple of days like this in a long time, and it's really it's great to see, and hopefully it's the culmination of what is a tremendous week of racing, guys.
Andrew, I talked to your podcast partner, Josh, a little bit earlier. He helped me preview one race, and you always come up, especially around this time of year with your success last year with Lord Miles. So there you go. Right off the bat, we can get it out of the way, Andrew.
Under betters go to the windows right now.
I made sure the check was able to deposit before I got that plug in for you. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Folks out there who are listening and or watching, I'm going to peel the curtain back a little bit here. There are some days where we as handicappers feel a sense of fatigue or even sometimes dread looking at the racing form where it looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics after a little while. Friday and Saturday are not those 2 days. Those 2 cards are absolutely fantastic. And everybody that I have talked to about these 2 cards is genuinely looking forward to something, whether it's the Kentucky Derby or a horse on the undercard. It's a lot of fun. And I mean, it's one of those instances where you're looking at this race in particular, the Kentucky Oaks. If you look at it a certain way, any of 7 or 8 of these 3-year-old fillies could be good enough to win this race, and you're going to get a price on whichever horse you wind up backing. There's not a huge favorite. The morning line favorite is 7-2. I think the morning line is going to move, to put it a little bit politely there. Having said that, this is a really fun race, and I'm excited to look at it with you guys.
We have 5 horses that are between 7-2 and 5-1 on the morning line. So it just shows you right there that it feels like a perfect version of what races like the Derby and Oaks were meant to be, where you get some of the best horses from all over that have been in good form, and they can all come together and see who's the best. And we get that at the end of the year in the Breeders' Cup, and it's nice that we can have it in sort of the middle of the year here with some of these big races. Let's do our best and take a trip through the field of the Oaks, and we can share some of our thoughts on all the fillies in here. DZ, let's start with you, and let's kind of just talk about the first 2 down on the inside. They kind of are similar in that both of them are big prices. Tapit Janelle, the number 1, who's 30-1 on the morning line. She came through the Oaklawn preps. She wasn't able to win any of them, but she picked up some points, finishing 2nd and 3rd behind Lemon Muffin and Torpedo Anna. Jin, she was over at Aqueduct. She went the Aqueduct route in the Busher and the Gazelle. Another one who didn't really threaten winning, but she picked up some points winning, getting some minor awards in those races. The both of them are going to be big prices. Can you make a case for either one of them? Do you like either one of them in the mix underneath somewhere, or do they seem a little overmatched here?
I come from the school of anybody could be 3rd in a race.
Sure.
When you're playing tries and things like that. These 2 would be the deepest of stretches. Torpedo Anna easily dispatched. Tappagenely last time out, and I don't see any situation where this filly will be able to make up that.
Did I call this one Janelle? I butchered the name. I was like, "What, Janelle?" Yeah, Janet. Yeah, I was like,
Yeah,
what
I
did
don't.
say? Yeah, whatever I said, it wasn't right. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I just, from a speed figure standpoint, she's never run a race remotely close enough to being fast enough to beat these. Jin Jin is very similar. She squeaks in with the points. She was beaten 9.5 lengths by Where's My Ring. Her lone recent victory comes over a sealed muddy racetrack in a race that was extremely slow, a minor stake. I guess the one thing she has going for her is that she has a win over this racetrack. But
Yep.
yeah, I mean, if I go into any more detail than that, I'm probably taking too much time away from others. For the deepest of long shot players. But if either of these two fillies get a big piece of this, I'll probably be turning the page to Saturday pretty quickly.
Andrew, a couple long shots down on the inside. Do any of them, fly on your radar?
So I'm going to make it 3 different pronunciations and hope at least one of them is right, because I thought it was Tappagenale. Maybe I'm wrong, but regardless, we're covering all of our bases. Yeah. I think we'll call her the one horse.
That's safest.
Yes. I think the one horse is going to show some speed. I don't think she had the ideal trip in the fantasy for what she wanted to do. She will at least be a pace factor, which is more than I can say for Jin Jin, who to me looks like a sprinter running in the wrong races for the right reasons. You see Hightail up on the top. That was a sprint horse. You see Hardspun down in the bottom. You don't necessarily think a ton of stamina with Hardspun. You think more turf than anything else. I wouldn't be surprised if they cut Jin Jin back to 7 furlongs or a mile, something one turn after the Kentucky Oaks has been run. They get the Oaks fever out of their system. And then this one winds up doing what she was supposed to do, because that win she had last year here at Churchill was actually pretty good going 7 furlongs. I just think she's going way too long here.
DZ, the 3 Where's My Ring was a maiden when she went over and won the Gazelle. And when you look at her speed figures, she actually fits pretty well with some of the top fillies in here, just looking at her last 3. And what I like is that it wasn't as if she just earned a good speed figure chasing Kinza, who's a nice Baffert filly. Sometimes that'll happen. There'll be a nice horse. They get a big figure. Everyone who chased them gets a bigger figure than they've ever received throughout their career. That wasn't the case with this one. She's actually run well at Santa Anita and at Aqueduct. And, she's got a lot of foundation. She's the most raced filly in the field. What do you think about the 3 Where's My Ring?
Got a better shot than the inside too.
Yep.
She was favored as a maiden in the Gazelle. The 2 fillies that she beaten there are Regulatory Risk, who was nearly 20-1 that day, and the aforementioned Jin Jin. So I can certainly question the depth of that particular race.
Yep.
I don't think she's without a chance. If the trip falls into her kindly, I could see her being good enough that if she takes another step forward, she could earn a minor piece of this. But, I keep coming back to the fact that it took her 8 times to win. I think that speed figure last time, the Aqueduct figures are hard to make, guys, over the winter, because that track sometimes is so incredibly slow that
it's unique too.
Yeah, you don't really, it's really, from one day to the next, it's really, really hard. But that being said, she's gotten better. She's an improving sort. If she works out a trip, would she shock me? No. But is she going to be somebody who lands on the top spot of a lot of my tickets? I'm going to say no to that as well.
Andrew, and she actually beat the horse right next door to her, Regulatory Risk, who Darin was mentioning also. Regulatory Risk was second in the race, the Gazelle, so where they both picked up some points and were able to qualify for this one. What are your thoughts on Where's My Ring? And then if you give a chance to Regulatory Risk right next door.
My biggest thought on Where's My Ring is a question. Have either of you guys heard about Jose Lezcano? He suffered an injury of some sort last week at Aqueduct. They were saying it might be a concussion. I don't know if he's been cleared or not. If he's not, that's a jockey switch to potentially monitor. I thought she ran well last time in the Gazelle. I don't think she beat anything, but it's not like that effort was a fluke. She did run a decent second in the Santa Isabel at Santa Anita. That matters. You see the pedigree by Twirling Candy out of a Tappet mare. You know the 1 1/8 isn't going to be what gets her beat. If anything, she might want a little bit longer. I probably prefer others on top, but it's a case where if this horse runs to that work we saw on April 26th at Churchill, where she went 4 furlongs in 46-3, I don't know if you want to leave her off your deeper exacta and trifecta tickets, because there's every chance she's figured things out. And what's going to be her 9th career start, she's very well seasoned compared to a couple of these. And a lot of times that experience winds up mattering on a big stage, and you get a horse that maybe isn't quite as talented as most of the field clunking up for second or third because of that. As far as Regulatory Risk goes, the one time that she won was what I thought was a perfect trip in the mud at Aqueduct, where she went wire to wire over a field that didn't hit me as anything particularly great. Might be a bit of a speed factor, but I don't think she's as fast early as a couple of these. To me, this looks like a field filler.
DZ, if you have a thought on Regulatory Risk, and then if not much, we can go right into Torpedo Anna.
Yeah, no, I agree with Andrew's assessment. The blinkers off, I suppose, is an interesting move from Chad Brown, considering that he put them on for the maiden victory, left them on for the next pair, and now they're coming off. So, I'm not quite sure what to make of that exactly. He does have a good history in terms of win percentages when removing the blinkers. Jose Ortiz listed to ride is an interesting angle as well, but it's another that's going to need to improve mightily in order to get a big piece of this.
And then we saw a very impressive performance in the fantasy from Torpedo Anna, and it was her first start as a 3-year-old. It was her first start since November, but it wasn't fluky at all, because she was incredibly talented as a 2-year-old. Her first 2 starts were really, really impressive, including a 9-length victory going a mile here at Churchill Downs. So she knows this racetrack. She's very comfortable here. She lost to a horse named Intricate, who at the time was very good. And Intricate looked like a horse who was going to be one of the top fillies in this division. And she just had some physical issues this year where she wasn't able to progress quite, as much as everyone else had. But DZ, she's tough to knock off of that performance. And she has like that nice running style where she can put herself in the race tactically. So she has plenty of time to recover. It's not like she wheels back quickly. She's got 5 weeks, since her last race to come back. This is a nice animal.
I can make an argument that she's the filly to beat in the race.
Yeah.
The one loss that she suffered, McPeak threw a lot at her real quick. She ran a monster race debuting on October the 26th.
Yep.
She came back 2 weeks later and ran another monster race, and then was asked to come back 2 weeks later again in a grade 2, where she took a step back, still managing to run second. Given the winter off, comes back and runs a huge race, winning the fantasy. And now she's working out like an absolute machine. She's got tactical speed. She's proven that she can rally from far off the pace. She's proven that she could win on the pace if it's a little bit slower up front. She's proven over this racetrack. There's really nothing not to like about her.
Yeah.
The only question is what the price is going to be, because I get the feeling when we get to some of the other ones like Tarifa and Leslie's Rose, I don't think they're going to take the lion's share of the money in terms of the favorites. And I don't think Torpedo Anna is going to be 5-1 either. This race for me, when you start to separate some of these top level fillies, is going to come down to value, and it'll be what she is, as we get close to post time, but she is 100% a legitimate win contender.
Andrew, positives, negatives on Torpedo Anna?
I don't have many in the way of negatives on this horse. I think there's every chance something went wrong in the Goldenrod, because we didn't see her again until she showed up back on the work tab in February. They did throw a lot at this one very quickly, as Darin mentioned. It's not like she ran terribly in the Goldenrod either. Maybe she moved a little bit early, whatever, but she came back, ran very well in the fantasy. And here's a scary thought. She could well move forward in her second start off of a long layoff for a trainer that knows how to win with horses at this sort of interval, at this sort of level. This is a guy in Kenny McPeak that when he gets a horse on the right track, they can win a lot of races in bunches. So this is a scary, scary horse. I have her second in this particular spot, but she could absolutely win this.
DZ, Lemon Muffin broke her maiden in the Honeybee. It was actually her first start going long. So at that point, you looked at her overall form, and she had been knocking on the door going shorter, and then finally was able to stretch out, put it all together, has this big victory. So she felt like a horse that was really moving forward. And then in the fantasy, not that she had needed to win that race, but she just did not fire at all. I mean, that was the most disappointing race in her career from the standpoint that she's better now than she was when she debuted, and she just didn't fire that day. She had run 5 straight really nice races, and then at 5-1, she just disappointed. But you know the coach, he's going to come back and he's going to take a shot right back here, and she's worked fine in the mornings. It doesn't look like there was any physical issue or anything wrong that day. Do you give her a shot to bounce back and, hit the board in here, or, do you think she's up against it?
Short answer is I think she's up against it. I'm a Ragozin sheet guy, and she's a good example of when a sheet tells you something. Where 3 starts back, she ran a new top in her first start of the year as a 3-year-old. She ran a 15.5. Then when she won the Honeybee, she ran a 14.75. So then she established a new top. So what happens now is you find out how good a horse is. Are they going to keep running similar figures? Are they going to keep moving forward off the big figure? Or are they going to step back? She stepped back and ran a 17. So what that tells me is that maybe not necessarily that a 14.75, 15 is going to be her lifetime best, and she's never going to be able to be faster than that. But now she's got to improve about 7 or 8 points in order to win this race. She's just not making that kind of jump from one start to the other. So for me, she falls into line with some of the other also-rans where I think a mid-pack result is probably best case scenario for her.
Andrew, we'll have you bookend a couple more long shots here with Lemon Muffin and then Fiona's Magic.
Sure. So Lemon Muffin's race 2 starts ago was fine. It didn't knock anybody's socks off figure-wise. It was visually impressive, but there were questions about what she beat. I would argue that maybe she bounced in the fantasy, but that even a bounce back effort to what we saw in the Honeybee isn't going to be enough to get this horse much of a shot in here. One thing I will say, though, looking back further into Lemon Muffin's form, there's a horse I like in the race after the Kentucky Oaks by the name of Minx Palace, who beat Lemon Muffin on November 2nd. So a little bit of a bonus there if you're listening to that. Minx Palace, 15-1 on the morning line in the race after the Oaks, I think has a pretty big shot. Fiona's Magic in the Oaks, not so much. I'm wondering what the heck is going on here. Because
so just to give you a little maybe background, they said that after the March 30th race that she was scoped and she was loaded with mucus. So they found a reason why she ran so poorly. They think they got that fixed, came back and worked her, and they wanted to give it a shot. So if you were wondering maybe why it was that poor of an effort or what happened, they did seem to find a reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's going to come back and win this. I just wanted to point that out. She's 30-1 here, Andrew, a pace factor at the very least, right?
Gino, that was what we call teeing it up for a co-host right there. I appreciate that very much, that you knew to take that cue. It's almost like you broadcasted for a living or something.
You've done this once or twice
in life. Fiona's Magic has a lot of early speed, is a good horse going one turn. That win in the Devonadale, yes, she had things all her own way, but she beat a decent field that day. Leslie's Rose came out of that race and wound up winning the Ashland. Not to take anything away from Fiona's Magic, I think she's a talented horse running in the wrong races for the right reasons. And you yourself said it, Gino, talking about, we'll give it a shot. That's not exactly the language you want to hear
coming into the
barn going into this kind of a race.
No. DZ, she feels like she can at least have a say in this race with that speed. A horse like her, she's got to be in here to at least be flashing that speed. That's her only chance for being really competitive here.
Yeah, she has to go. How far she wants to go is a different question. She's never won around 2 turns. She's only attempted it once. You guys referenced what allegedly took place in that race. But to be honest with you, I just needed to see more since that race. She's got one workout on April.
It's not enough. And it's a slow, real, maintenance-y type work. Exactly. So I feel like she would be, I know you want to take a swing, but she would be such a more logical contender in the 8 bells.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't cut her back there. I mean, I
Yeah.
would agree. In that spot, you can definitely make a legitimate case with her speed on the cutback. But yeah, I just look, her Devona Dale was a nice race. She beat Leslie Rose that day. She beat into Champagne that day. She's another that, if she ran well in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, she'd fit here quite well if those speed figures kept improving. But she's just a total anomaly. Even if what they're saying about the March 30th race is true, I just needed to see more since then.
Oh, yeah.
I needed a couple of workouts. I needed a bullet in 47-2. I needed to see her work in company where the other horse was being scrubbed on to keep up with her, and she looked like she was sitting on a loaded gun. So I don't have any of that to land on. So I just have to draw a line through her. And if she wins and jumps up, she's going to beat me.
Andrew, the lukewarm morning line favorite is Tarifa, 7-2. She's won 3 in a row. All of them were over at Fairgrounds. She disappointed a bit here at Churchill. Didn't have the smoothest of races that day in her second career start. Certainly talented, lots of ability, but now we're going to start to see a lot of the top tier contenders. And I think we include obviously Torpedo, Anna, maybe even a horse like Where's My Ring, because they all do, or a lot of them do, want to get the same kind of trip. They're all looking for this sitting not too far off the leader within a couple lengths, and 7 or 8 horses can't all get that trip.
Nope. That's absolutely true. And with Tarifa, while she is a nice filly, and I'm not going to discredit a horse that seems to be going the right way, she has had a series of picture perfect trips against short fields. And that's unlikely to replicate itself on Friday afternoon against 13 other 3-year-old fillies in the Kentucky Oaks. I saw the race in the Fairgrounds Oaks. She ran fine. She won. She got a perfect trip in a 6-horse field. The race 2 back in the Rachel Alexandra, same story. Perfect trip, short field, did what she was supposed to do. She's a talented filly. I can't bet her at her likely price. I need way more of a price than I am likely to get come post time on this one. And of the horses that are likely to go off in that group of favorites, this is the one that's not going to be on my tickets. And if this one wins, I tip my hat and I move on to Saturday. I'm just not as impressed with this one as apparently morning line odds maker Mike Battaglia thinks I should be.
DZ, talk to us about how you feel on the Fairgrounds Oaks winner.
So I think her chances are going to come down to how could she adapt to getting a different kind of trip than she's gotten before. And more so than it just being a perfect trip in that she laid off a couple of horses and was able to just kind of make first run, get the lead, and so on and so forth. She's going to be farther back than I think she's ever been. I don't think she's that quick. I think where she's been situated early on in these races have been a product of pace scenarios that were far less than quick. I think with horses in this race, like Where's My Ring, like Regulatory Risk, like Torpedo Anna, like Fiona's Magic, like Into Champagne, and so on and so forth, and Ways and Means, I think that this is going to be a much faster type of a pace scenario than she's accustomed to. And the question will become, can she adapt to that, and will it benefit her to be 6 lengths off the lead, where if they're going quick up front, she can then rally into it? Or is she going to be in chase mode in a different spot than she's accustomed to, and she's not going to respond well to it? From a Ragozin standpoint, she's coming off of a huge figure at a 9 1/4. It was a 4-point jump from a previous race. She's prone to the bounce off that. And those two things put together at a short price make her a favorite that you want to fade on in the Oaks.
DZ, you have really kept a great eye on Turfway Park over the last few years. In fact, you had Everland in your exotic tickets at a big price, winning the Bourbonette Oaks. Talk to us a little bit about Everland and her chances in this race to make some noise at a big price.
Well, look, I mean, obviously the first question is the surface. She's never run over a conventional dirt surface. That does not mean that she can't. She's by Arrogate out of a Tappet mare. So certainly from a pedigree standpoint, there's nothing to say or nothing to indicate that she can't. She did get the benefit of being able to sit back in what was actually a pretty honest pace. Fractions in the 47 range going 2 turns at Turfway are pretty quick. And she was able to just kind of wait for her spot. She accelerated very well. But the speed figures are light. She's never run a race remotely fast enough to win this. Now, I will say this. When a horse that does like a conventional dirt surface gets it for the very first time, more often than not, they don't just run well, they explode the first time. You've seen it in serious racehorses. Animal Kingdom's Kentucky Derby is a prime example of that. That doesn't mean that this filly's going to do that. But that's really what I think her chances come down to. Will she take to the surface? The one thing that concerns me, and she's never been a quick workhorse, but the workouts at Keeneland and Churchill are not just not fast, they are slow.
Yeah.
And watching them, there's just nothing about them that, Animal Kingdom was going into the Kentucky Derby as a horse that never run on dirt, but his pre-Derby workout was
awesome.
Monstrous.
Yeah.
This filly is not doing anything like that. So if you're going to play her, you're just throwing a dart, hoping that she responds to the conventional dirt surface, but she needs to improve substantially.
AC, the two horses right next to each other in the 9 and the 10, both long shots on the morning line, probably expecting different running styles from the two of them. DZ sort of mapped out what we could expect from Everland. You can point out anything on her if you want. And then into Champagne, she, to me, of the big long shots, I don't think she could win, but with her running style, where she might be able to just sit a trip, fall into it. As DZ said, anyone can run third or fourth in certain races. She at least has the profile of a horse I could see being in the race, being involved. She beat Leslie's Rose. She finished in front of her a couple starts back. That Devona Dale, she looked like she was about to loom up and move and go right on by. And so I just don't know how far she wants to go, but falling into it, of all the bust out long shots, I don't think she's completely hopeless. Talk to us about the 9 Everland and the 10 into Champagne. Andrew, Champagne.
Everland has a really cool story, and I wish I remember who wrote it, but they talked to trainer Eric Foster, who the night that Everland got claimed for $30,000 in December, he mapped out a route to the Kentucky Oaks for this filly. And given the pedigree, I mean, Arrogate offspring are rare. I am shocked that they ran this horse in a maiden claiming race solely because of the value this horse would have as a broodmare. But she won that night, wound up moving forward in a big way with Lasix the next time out, and wound up taking a route to the Bourbonnette Oaks, which she won when the race, I don't want to say fell apart, but did set up for a closer. And that's the one thing I will say with Everland. If you're playing the super and you're looking for a deep closer to clunk up and get fourth, if there's a meltdown, I think you can do a lot worse than throwing that horse in your fourth slot. And the reason I say that is because of horses like number 10 into Champagne, who hits me as another speed horse that wants one turn. The 1.16 mile route at Gulfstream Park has a very short stretch that is often very kind to horses on or near the lead as they turn for home. It's a case where they see the wire right there, and a lot of times closers have some trouble getting some momentum solely because they turn out of that far turn into the stretch, and boom, there's the finish line. Into Champagne faded pretty abruptly when Power Squeeze and Ways and Means came calling. I don't like Into Champagne in this particular spot. I don't think she's a two-turn horse. I think the pedigree bears that out. She's by Into Mischief out of Speightstown mare. There's a lot of sprinter on both top and bottom there. I think this is another case of nice horse running in the wrong race for the right reasons because she's a talented horse. No thanks with that one.
DZ, if you have a thought on Into Champagne, and then we can move on to Ways and Means and some real top contenders towards the outside.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew's assessment of how far she wants to go. I think she is a 7 furlong, 1-turn miler type. I do think she is coming out of a very good prep race for this, and we'll touch on the top two coming out of that race shortly. But there's several horses between the Oaks and the Derby that I think, based on pedigree and based on what I've seen in the stretch of their last couple of starts, are capped in terms of how far they want to go. Into Champagne is one of those horses. She's going to be wide into the turn, probably chasing along speed. And I think I would rather see, like Andrew alluded to, a deep closer with upside at a price to round out tries and supers than a fading speed type that I think is distance limited.
Ways and Means won her debut last year in August. She won by 12. She earned a 90 Beyer speed figure for a 2-year-old at that point, and she was all the buzz. She felt like the horse in the division. She was on the East Coast, and you had Tamara on the West Coast that were both very, very talented. And then she had a trouble trip in the Spinway, and she was off from September all the way to March. She showed back up in March, DZ, and she had, again, just ran into traffic into the first turn. She's 3 deep. She's about 4 lengths off there early on. She's actually about 8th, and she has to make an early 4-wide move. She's 3 deep at the top of the lane. She moves to the lead, and she gets run down by a nice horse named Power Squeeze right outside of her, but she's 5 3/4 lengths clear of Into Champagne for third that day. And she just feels like a horse that is just screaming and oozing with talent and is just waiting for one day to put it all together.
So if Anna Marie is the wise guy horse in the Derby, this is the wise girl horse.
Oh, yeah. Especially with that work the other morning, right?
Yeah.
Where she went 46-1 in the morning.
I'll say this. If you like her and you think you're sniffing 5-1 on her, ain't going to happen.
No shot.
I think there's a lot of people that are keying in on Ways and Means, especially if you go back and you watch the Gulfstream Park Oaks, where she made a very aggressive and wide move down the backstretch, forcing the pace issue, did most of the running that day, ran extremely well given the trip that she had off of a very, very long layoff. Now, with that being said, similar to what I said about Into Champagne, Ways and Means is by practical joke, probably his best at a mile, out of a Warrior's Reward mare, who again was a 7 furlong horse. I don't know how far she wants to go. And we'll find out, but she's going 1 1/8 for the first time. She gave it up a little bit in the stretch, albeit with a bona fide legitimate excuse in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. And she worked out like an absolute machine at the end of last week. I think the 9 furlongs is a question. And how I land on her will come down to, with 2 minutes to post, what the odds board looks like. If she's 4-1, she's all over the place for me. If she's 5-2, I try to beat her.
Andrew, let's talk about one of the top contenders in here, Ways and Means.
I cannot imagine Ways and Means is an easy horse to ride, given the evidence that we have on hand. Her 3 trips to date, bumped hard at the break, taken up cliff heels, steady first, 6th path. And then you get to the workout that Darin mentioned, where she went 4 furlongs in 46-1. Chad Brown went on the record after that workout and said, basically, that wasn't the plan. She went too fast. Talk about things you don't want to hear from a trainer before the race. You almost want to hear the trainer speak of, she's doing great, we wouldn't trade places with anybody, and all those cliches that horse racing Twitter makes fun of on a daily basis, right? Having said that, yes, she has had a number of very, very bad trips. I think some of it is bad luck. I think some of it is her making her own trouble.
Yeah.
And I am very hesitant to back a head case on a big stage in front of 100,000 people going 1 1/8 against a full field. There's a lot of variables here. And at 5-1, I think that's a fair price. But I agree with Darin. And by the way, Darin, we are agreeing way too much. Can we start talking about how Montreal wasn't a work so that we can manufacture some sort of disagreement here? If she's 5-1, I could see playing her. She's going to be closer to 5-2 than 5-1. And at that price, I'll try to beat her.
DZ, Power Squeeze was able to go buy her on March the 30th in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. Power Squeeze has won 4 in a row, all 4 victories since moving to a mile from the 6 furlongs, or a mile and above. And she doesn't overwhelm you. She doesn't have the best speed figures, but she's super workmanlike. And for what Andrew was pointing out with ways and means, there's something to be said for certain horses that going to find ways to get into trouble. And for ways and means, just 2 races so far, I think we still have a small enough sample size where we can absolutely say those were 2 completely separate issues. But if it starts to happen 3 and 4 times now where you're getting in trouble or there are some issues, and then you look at a horse like Power Squeeze, who just no excuses. Power Squeeze, DZ, is like the New York Knicks. They're just going to try to find a way to be workmanlike. They're going to try to get the job done. They're not going to be flashy, and you're going to look up and they're going to be beating you, Joel Embiid. That's what's going to be happening. I thought you liked that one.
I love it. Yeah, look, what's not to like about her? Nobody talks about her. I mean, all you hear about is the other 4 horses in this race. Not once have I heard anybody focus on this filly. I'll start with this. We've talked about ways and means and my concern about how far she wants to go. Into Champagne, my concern about how far she wants to go. I've got no concerns about how far Power Squeeze wants to go.
Yep.
Let alone she's by a Belmont Stakes winner out of an Awesome Again mare. This filly can run all day and then some. Then you go and you take a look back in her past performances and say, wow, the light switch really went on when she went around 2 turns for the first time. Then you go and you watch her races, and yeah, there's nothing flashy about her. She's not the type that the rider is sitting there with a stranglehold on her that's push button, and when she sees daylight, he throws across at her and she just takes off. That's not the type of filly she is. She's the type that you kind of have to keep pedaling and keep her going. But once she gets going, she does not stop. And she keeps coming and she keeps coming. And when a lot of these fillies are starting to get leg weary in that last 1/8 of a mile, she's going to keep coming. And I understand Ways and Means had the tougher trip. I get it. Everything was stacked against her. I understand all that. This filly is legitimately good. And if you're a Ragozin player like I am, and that's the last thing I looked at, she ran an 11 top on New Year's Day in the cash run. Then she regressed by 3 points, still winning at Tampa. And what did she do last time? What do you want to see after the regression? She paired up the 11 and came right back to it. If anything, she's ready to take another move forward according to that. And thus, Power Squeeze is my top pick.
She's trying to win her 5th in a row. Andrew, talk to us about Power Squeeze.
So I can't make her my top pick, but I'm convinced Darin was looking over my shoulder as I looked at this race, because we've gone through 12 horses, and I agree far more often than I think we ever have. Too often as handicappers, we make excuses for horses that run 2nd and 3rd a lot, and we devalue horses that know how to win. That's one of those tendencies as handicappers that if you do it too often, you wind up falling into a trap, you wind up chasing, and it ultimately does far more harm than good. Since stretching out to a mile or longer, Power Squeeze has done absolutely nothing wrong. She stretched out at Delaware. If you want to say that was a slow race, yeah, sure it was. They shipped this horse down to Gulfstream. They run her in a stakes race. She wins by 5 at odds of 8-1. They ship her to Tampa. She runs up against a horse named Life Talk from the Mike Rapoli operation that was supposed to be a legitimate Kentucky Oaks prospect. Life Talk did not run well that day. Power Squeeze did. They then sent her off at 11-1 in the Gulfstream Park Oaks because Ways and Means was taking all the money. I understand Power Squeeze not being favored that day. 11-1 was pretty strange even as it was happening. And what do you know? She ran a really nice race. My one concern with Power Squeeze is the outside post. We're going a mile and an eighth. There's a little bit of a run into that first turn, but they don't have the full length of the stretch. It's going to fall on Daniel Centeno, a very good rider for many, many, many years, mostly at Tampa Bay, to work out a trip aboard Power Squeeze. What that looks like, I'm not 100% sure because she's shown she doesn't need the lead but does have some tactical speed. If I'm backing Power Squeeze, I just hope she doesn't fall into that no man's land zone where she's in the second flight, kind of, sort of, and 4 or 5 wide, surrendering a whole bunch of ground. But I agree with Darin in the fact that we're not talking nearly enough about this horse. She'll be on all of my exotics tickets. And if I'm playing pick 4s, pick 5s, anything of that nature, you could do a lot worse than throwing in a horse that I think is going to be every bit of that 12-1 morning line, maybe even a little bit higher than that.
And what's nice, DZ, is you pointed out something with Tarifa where, the last few races for Power Squeeze, she's sat a pretty nice trip. She's been within a couple lengths. She hasn't been too far out of it, but you can at least go back to the race at Delaware and say, hey, look, there was a time when she did have to overcome something and come from 6-7 lengths out of it towards the back of the pack. So we've at least seen her have to do something a little bit different if things get uncomfortable. I like that too. I know it's just a small something, but you pointed out some of these horses, at least a few of them, are going to be in a different spot than they're used to. Which ones might be able to run still their race or close to their race, even under less than ideal circumstances? I just have a feeling that she's that type of horse.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, her race at Delaware, it was a slow race, but, when you're 6 lanes back through a 49-second half, I mean, how fast can you possibly run the second half of the race? And like I said, she's getting better and better, and she wants every bit of the mile and an eighth, which is something that you can't definitely say for a lot of these major contenders. So, yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way, regardless of whatever else happens, if she wins, I'll have a very good day.
And right outside of her, Andrew, is Just FYI and Leslie's Rose. Those two were the 1-2 finishers in the Ashland, but we can talk about them individually because they're both obvious top contenders here. Just FYI was your Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies winner last year. She was a perfect 3 for 3. She was supposed to start a little earlier this year, so her plans got backed up. There wasn't anything really major, just some small stuff along the way. So the Ashland was her first start since November, and she was 5th, about 3 lengths off. She was out in the 5 path, so she was pretty wide, and then shifted down inside to the 2 path late that day. She ran behind Leslie's Rose. Leslie's Rose got a really great trip in the Ashland, and she bounced back from a really disappointing effort at Gulfstream Park in the Devona Dale. So you can start with Just FYI and then maybe head to Leslie's Rose.
Just FYI came back in the Ashland, and everything about that race screamed prep in big, huge, bold letters. This was a horse that did have a minor setback. I think she was supposed to run back in March in the Devona Dale, wound up scratching either the day of the race or the day before the race. They got her back on track. They shipped her in the Ashland, and she had a miserable trip. Was one of a couple of horses in that race, caught very, very wide, while Leslie's Rose set the picture-perfect trip, rating just off the pace, got the jump, was never threatened. Now, Leslie's Rose, I think, is a very nice horse, but I'm looking at these two horses here. I think Just FYI has every right to move forward, and if she does, I think she's going to be pretty tough. We've seen what this horse can do when she's got a foundation under her. She won 2 grade 1s last year. She won the Frizette. She won the Juvenile Fillies. And when she won the Juvenile Fillies, she did that from the far outside post. She's got plenty of tactical speed. She can give Junior Alvarado plenty of options. And guys, I am a sucker or as our friend Chase, the Wolf of Oaklawn, would call it, a little pig boy for this particular work angle. When you see a work 2 works back, that's very, very fast. You see a 5 furlong bullet in 59-4, and then that most recent work is a nice, easy 4 furlong work. That's a maintenance move. Bill Mott's a Hall of Famer. He's won a lot of races, and I think he's got Just FYI just where he wants her. To me, Just FYI is the most likely winner of this race. We've seen her talent on display before, and if people are going to act as though the Ashland was legitimate as opposed to just a prep, I will gladly let them do that, and I will take advantage of what I think is a slightly inflated price. I respect Leslie's Rose. She's got a lot of talent, but I don't think the trip she got in the Ashland winds up repeating itself. And in order for her to win this race, guys, I think it might have to.
Yeah, DZ, for Leslie, the trip that she got last time, win or lose, imagine it'll be a completely different type of trip here, drawn way outside versus when she was saving all the ground, got to angle around perfectly, and just couldn't have asked for a better setup.
Yeah, look, if you go back and you watch the Ashland and you come away with any conclusion other than Leslie's Rose had everything go right and Just FYI had pretty much everything against her, if you don't see that, then we just don't watch races the same way.
Yep.
Now, that being said, if Just FYI was in post position number 7, she'd probably be my top pick. I understand she overcame post 12 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, but she had a perfect trip despite post 12. She's not sitting second a length and a half off the lone speed in this race. There's a lot of speed in here. Fillies inside of her are going to go. My concern with Just FYI, I understand that, yeah, she's the one coming off the bad trip in the Ashland. And my concern is the way this race is shaping up, I'm a little worried she's going to get that trip again. And if she does, what happens? Leslie's Rose, I'm concerned, is going to have an even worse trip from post 14. I think the way these posts have been drawn has completely changed the complexion of the race, which is why if you ask me who I think the most likely winner of the race, I go back to Torpedo Anna. Would Just FYI surprise me? Of course not. Andrew alluded to the workout on April the 22nd. Forget about looking at it in the past performances. Watch it. I mean, it was sensational, which is why I said if she was in post 7, she'd be my top pick. Leslie's Rose, I'm going to let beat me if she can from post 14. She's a nice filly.
It kind of just felt like the last effort was her big effort, right? That race, and if you bet her that day, you got a great price. She was forgotten about because she disappointed in the Gulfstream race before that as a heavy favorite, where she was down inside. She didn't really have much of an excuse that day. You know, she just kind of didn't get the better of the trips as the other 2 who were in front of her, but it wasn't a bad trip. And that's a little my concern with a perfect trip. She is one of those type of horses that like fierceness, you know, she'll run out and look as good as you possibly can. If she has to encounter some trouble or just not her actual ideal circumstances, which are going to be difficult to get from way out here, right? Then what are we going to get from her?
And I think if you asked me from a betting standpoint, I think Ways and Means is going to be favored. And I think Just FYI or Torpedo Anna are going to be second, third choice one way or the other. I think Leslie's Rose is going to drift for the reasons we're talking about.
And Tarifa a little bit.
Yeah, I think she's going to drift. And while I would love to support her if she drifts, I would be more surprised if Leslie's Rose won this race than if my top pick Power Squeeze won the race, to be honest with you. I'm not high on her off the perfect trip in post 14. I would love for her to take money so I can bet against her, but I actually think she's going to go off a halfway decent price. Out of the 2, I would prefer Just FYI. I don't know what kind of price she's going to offer. Again, it comes down to value, but I do think that the way that these posts have been drawn has made this an extremely interesting handicapping puzzle.
So, Andrew, let's put a bow on the Kentucky Oaks. We just hit on the horse who I think you said is going to be your top selection, Just FYI. Give us a little recap of the few that you like here, and then we'll pass it over to DZ.
Sure. So really quick, I think it's wise to at least pay some attention to the also eligibles before we move on too far. Our Pretty Woman has a lot of speed and will be a pace factor if she draws in.
And it's kind of a bummer she's not in the race.
A little bit. Yeah, right? She's good.
She was second in one of the big preps, and her first two were wins. She feels like the type of horse who should qualify based on the points, and so that, just a little bummer. I'm on my high horse there. So
no, it's okay. I got you. It's all right. I just keep the horse out of your stash and you're okay. Our Pretty Woman has some speed. And if you like Just FYI, because of the trip she got in the Ashland, you have to at least give Candied some consideration if she's allowed to run too. And that one might be a little bit of a bigger price. So do keep an eye on the also eligibles if there wind up being some scratches. Having said that, Just FYI is my top selection. I'll also be using Torpedo Anna and Power Squeeze as B's and underneath. I think Just FYI is a very, very talented filly and seems like the class of what is a very good, especially at the top, bunch of fillies in the Kentucky Oaks. There are some years where we look at the Kentucky Oaks and we're going, gosh, this is a weak division. This is not one of those years. There are some really good 3-year-old fillies in here, guys.
DZ, it feels like my opinion is a little bit of a combination of both for you and Andrew. I think if I'm trying to play a pick 4, pick 5, or any type of exotics, the 3 that I for sure want to be closing with are Torpedo Anna, are Just FYI, and Power Squeeze. I need those 3. Ways and Means is likely on the ticket. I do agree that she'll be overbet, but if I have some big prices throughout, I'll probably still have her on there. I may throw in a ticket or 2 with Where's My Ring, who I think of the bigger prices I could build a case for. Talk to us about how you're going to look at maybe wagering on the Oaks.
Yeah, we're all in the same vicinity here. Power Squeeze is my top selection. I'll make a strong win bet on her unless if I'm live for boxcars in a pick 4 or a pick 5. Torpedo Anna would be my A2, depending on price with her. I'm a little bit concerned she's going to take a lot of money in here. But those 2, because of post draws and because of everything else we've spoken about, they're my clear-cut 2. Then it'll probably be a way back to Just FYI as my 3rd selection. But I'm happy that I've been able to kind of narrow my focus on this race and have a pretty strong opinion, which will give me an opportunity in some of the races on the undercard to spread out a little bit more. And if I could, even if my main ticket, if I only have the 5 and the 12 on it, and that's what I'm live to, I'll feel pretty good about that going into that. So that's really cut and dry here. 12 and 5 up and down all over the place.
DZ, you're out in Kentucky right now, and you do work over for Twin Spires. Now, for the Derby with DRF Bets, anyone that maybe has a DRF Bets account, they won't be able to play that. So you will have, I'm sure, lots of new players, and around the Derby, there's always new people playing and looking to sign up for accounts. What kind of promotions, what kind of stuff do you have over there that you want to pump, or anything that you else that you're doing this week that you want to promote?
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on at Twin Spires. The big featured offer is the Derby Week Money Back, which is every race. It started opening night on Saturday. It runs all the way through the last race on Kentucky Derby Day. It's a fan favorite. Whenever we put up polls and ask people what they like, the money back is always one that is at the top of the list. Up to $10 back on your win bet if your horse runs 2nd or 3rd. You need at least 5 horses, which seems to be no problem. In order to get your money back for 2nd, you need at least 8 horses to get your money back for 3rd. On Thursday, we have a leaderboard contest, which is free to enter. $2,500 is up for grabs. $10 win bet on the races on the Thursday card at Churchill Downs. If your horse finishes 1st, 2nd, or 3rd that you place that win bet on, you're going to earn points and move up and down the leaderboard. So if you could finish in the top 10 there, you're going to get some extra bankroll for the weekend. And then new players, we have a $200 sign-up bonus as well, a nice deposit match there. So be sure to go to twinspires.com and go to the offers page and opt into all 3 of those great promotions centered around Kentucky Derby Week.
Andrew, I had a conversation earlier with your podcast partner from Drinking Champagne. Talk to us about what other stuff you have working on this weekend. I know you've been writing articles and any other content that you want to plug.
So before I get kicked out of the space that is sometimes called the no chalk zone for declaring that if fierceness shows up, everyone's running for second, I will plug the site that I do a lot of my work on, and that's winnersandwhiners.com. We have been doing a lot more horse racing content these last 6 weeks or so. Numbers for that have been outstanding, so we're going to do more of that. We have a couple of deals that are going to be live on our site for new players. So Darin mentioned a whole bunch of promos going on at Twin Spires if you've got an account already. If you don't have an account, sign up over at winnersandwhiners.com. That link is going to be in all of our Kentucky Derby previews, all of our Kentucky Oaks previews, and you'll be able to get a really cool sign-up offer with our promo code. So make sure you're on the lookout for that. I'll be doing a lot of stuff with Drinking Champagne. We've already got the Oaks and Derby stuff up. I'll be doing a lot of stuff for the Winners and Whiners YouTube channel as well. It's a really fun week, guys. And this is one of those weeks where it's easy to be a horse racing fan because there's so much stuff to dissect, and you'll look forward to reading the racing form to be able to see, okay, who do I like here? Who do I like here? Who do I like here? As opposed to looking at a racing form going, who do I like here? Who do I like here? What's going on? There are so many different opportunities over the next couple of days with what seem like 93,173 races coming up at Churchill Downs with about 80,000 horses signed on. So a lot of fun, always a blast. And this is the couple of days where we as horse racing fans and content creators have a responsibility to be there for people who are dropping in for their once or twice a year occurrence. So here's hoping we can give some of them some winners so they keep coming back.
Hopefully we led you in the right direction in the Oaks. Andrew and Darin will be back to help me out with the Kentucky Derby. So thank you all so much. If you're watching on social media, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to try to do a lot better job of getting all of the videos and all the content I have over on YouTube and try to build that up a little bit. So if you can subscribe or like any of the videos, that'll definitely help. And you will hear from these gentlemen again in just a bit, talking about the Kentucky Derby as we go through the runners in the Derby field. Thanks so much, everyone, and we wish you the best of luck on Kentucky Oaks Friday.